not quite sure what to call this. I guess it would be kind of like a confessional, but not. um, I just like really want to talk about something that's like really important to me, with regards to like a situation that happened last night, early this morning. Um, because I feel like it's something that happens a lot, and I feel like it's something that all of us, we find ourselves in these kinds of situations more often than not, and I don't think we really understand the gravity of these kinds of situations because of how often it happens, you know? Um, but for some reason, it's really sticking with me today. But before I say anything about it, I do want to say that um, the situation I'm going to talk about, it is, in my particular situation, it was involving like a girl and a guy, like a man and a woman. And I'm going to use she, her, and he, him pronouns for it, but it applies to all genders. It applies to all sexual orientation types of situations. It applies to all different kinds of environments, cisgendered, transgendered, non-binary, all of it. Like, so don't get hung up on the pronouns that I'm using. Don't get hung up on like the fact that I'm using a situation that is heteronormative, because the situation I'm talking about was in this instance, but it applies to a lot. It applies to so many, and I don't want the message to get kind of lost in political correct bullshit right now, because it's not gonna, like, I'm gonna say it how it happened, but yes, technically it applies to all different genders. It can go both ways, whatever, always. So anyway, I've been thinking all day about the situation that happened last night. And it's just stuck with me because I used to always think to myself about, if you see a girl or a guy or somebody who's non binary, if you see a person and they're out and they're clearly intoxicated, like blackout, like not able to drive, not able to consent to anything, I would always tell myself, like, oh yeah, I'd be the one to like be there for them, and I'd be the one to like make sure they got home safe, and I would usually do that, but I feel like last night I actually failed at that. Um, so okay, I'm just gonna explain the situation. Last night I went out with a friend, and we met up downtown at a club here, and I ended up hanging out with her and like three of her other friends, and like some other people were like chilling about. Um, so there was five of us total hanging out, girls anyway. And then one of the girls, her boyfriend comes, picks her up, and they leave. So it ended up being like me, my friend, and then her two other friends who I just met that night. And so we've been hanging out, and then the bars are closing, and these two guys that I guess that they were friends with, that one of them I had met a couple times and the other one I had never met before. They own some bar. I'm not going to say what it is or where, but they like had just opened up a bar and like invited us to come check it out, whatever. And mind you, the bar closed at like 1:30. I'd had two drinks. My last drink had been at 11 p.m., so I was like already sober. So like they'd been drinking all night, and whatever, that's fine. They're, being responsible, but I had to work all day, so I was like, I'm done drinking, but I'll hang out with y'all. And then there was some other guy who was tagging along, but like, we're not gonna get into that. So, the four of us girls at this point, and then this one guy go with these other two guys to their bar, and hang out. And yes, it's, you know, bar closed, so like technically like their bar's not even open or anything. And we're all hanging out, and we get there, and immediately they're just like, oh, you want something to drink? And they're like giving people drinks for, you know, for free, not, you know, because they're friends, so you know, they're just drinking. I'm not drinking anything because I'm like, yo, I gotta be up at like 7 a.m. and I work like 10 hours tomorrow, like I'm good. um but the other girls, they were drinking, and I just remember feeling like a little uncomfortable with how much one of the men, and this is the one that I just met that night, he just kind of kept being like, do you want anything to drink? And I think he was trying to be like a host. I think he was just excited to have people like in his bar and like to see his stuff, and like he had some like a good selection of things that I hadn't tried or seen before. And like I tried a sip of my friend's like rosé um beer or whatever, but outside of that I was just kind of like, yeah, no dude, like I'm not drinking, like I have to work. And so we were all just hanging out, and you know, mind you, we got there around like 1:30, 1:40ish. And we were there until like 3:45. So like we're there for a good 2 hours, and they're like still drinking, still party's still going, things are, you know, whatever. One of the girls, she ends up like, by the time we get there, within like 10 minutes, she's like not like passed out, but she's like head down. They bring her a blanket, and she's just like, I'm good right here. And I, you know, making a mental note of myself like, oh, okay, go check on that girl periodically, like make sure she's okay. And then the rest of us went upstairs because I guess they had 2 levels, and we're like checking out like what was going on upstairs and everything. And so we're all hanging out, and they have like another bar up there, so they're still drinking, and there's like music and stuff. And so it's me, my friend, and this other girl who I had also not met because the other one's downstairs, and they're still drinking, and then the guy who's chilling with us, and then the 2 guys that own the bar. So there's 6 of us upstairs and 1 downstairs. And so sorry if I'm like looking off to the side, it's just because I'm like stressed. So this they're upstairs, and they're all drinking, and I'm not. And the guy that owned, one of the guys that owned the bar that I didn't know, he kind of kept being like, oh, you sure you don't want to drink? And I was like, no, like I'm good, fam. And at one point, the other girl that was with us that I had just met, I remember she like had been sitting on one of the couches they had there, and like had been like looking into the mirror kind of weird. And I was like, oh, this girl's like, she's done, you know, like she's done. And so I'm like making a mental note like, all right, you know, like go check on her in a second, like she's taking her shoes off, like she's done for the night. And so we're all still like hanging out, she's kind of chilling on the couch for a second, and then this guy, the one who owned the bar that I didn't know, and the girl, like they go off somewhere, you know, and everybody kind of assumes, oh, they're probably making out, and that's probably what they were doing, whatever. And it's just the rest of us hanging out. So fast forward to like 3:45, so this is probably like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours later. We're just like, all right, like it's time to go, like I gotta get home, and like, you know, they're ready to go. So I was like, I'll take all of you guys home. So it's like me, my friend, the girl from downstairs that was like laying down under the blanket, and the dude that had been chilling with us. And I'm like, you know what, let's just go to my car, I'll take us home. And we get downstairs, and I'm like, oh, should we grab the other girl, you know? And mind you, I'm the only one who was technically sober at this point. Like, the 2 girls, like, one of them, like, she was probably starting to sober up, the one that had been downstairs sleeping. And then my friend, like, she'd been drinking all night, but she was still good. She was still going. Definitely intoxicated, not driving at all, but she was still good. And then the guy who was with us, like, he'd also kind of, he'd been drinking a little bit too. So I was like, I'm honestly the most sober one here because I haven't had a lick of alcohol besides that sip of the rosé beer since 11 p.m. and it was 3:45. So we are outside, you know, and I'm like asking everybody, like, you got your phone, you got your keys, you got your wallet, and I'm like, wait, where's that other girl? What's her name? I can't remember. Like, should we go up and get her? And they're like, oh, no, 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 it's fine, like, you should, it's fine. You should just go. Like, she'll be fine. And I guess they're like, oh, we're all friends. Like, they had all been friends. So I was like, oh, okay. And so, like, we left her. And I, like, drive the rest of I drove the guy to his car, and then I drove, like, you know, the one girl who'd been sleeping back to her, you know, where she needed to go, and then my friend home, and then I go home. Okay, you know, and you think, end of story. So this morning, I was just thinking about it, and I just was like, you know, I don't feel comfortable with the fact that I left that girl there with those two dudes. And I'm not even saying that anything happened, but okay, let me break it down to you like this. If you have a girl or a guy or somebody who's non-binary and they are completely intoxicated, like can barely stand up, can't even have their shoes on, like their talking is not fully coherent from the last time that you remembered, and you have another person who's been supplying them alcohol for like the last, you know, 2 hours, and that person takes them off somewhere to go make out with them or whatever. I'm gonna be honest with you, that's predatory. Like, that makes me uncomfortable. Because not only had these dudes already seen that these girls were already drunk before they invited us to their bar to drink more for another 2 hours, these dudes were clearly not even remotely as drunk as these girls were. And she was like, not like this particular girl that we left, like, she's not, she, all day I just been thinking about it. Like, for all I know, nothing could have happened. So, like, I'm not trying to sit here and say something happened. Like, I don't know. For all I know, nothing could have happened. They really could have all just been friends and, like, she, like, crashed on their couch or whatever. But I am going to say this. That girl was too drunk to be consenting to anything. And I, as the sober person, fucking knew that. And I, as a sober person, was also pretty aware, even though I was just meeting her and the guy who owned the bar that night. I just met both of them that night. I was also pretty fucking aware as a sober person that this dude was clearly attracted to this girl and was clearly open to having some kind of romantical encounter with her that night, even though she was plastered. And this dude, what makes it seem predatory to me, and I'm gonna say predatory, I don't care if that seems harsh, and what makes it uncomfortable for me is the fact that not only was it that he invited us to the bar and we hung out for 2 hours, you know, and they had enough time to like sober up a little bit, and then they went to and did whatever they did or not, because I don't know. What makes me so uncomfortable with it is the fact that they invited us there and then we're like basically just like funneling drinks to these girls for 2 hours straight who were already drunk, like already intoxicated. And there's reasons why I'm not saying like who these people are or bars, because I understand like everything that I'm implying right now can have some kind of legal ramification if I'm not careful, but it doesn't make it any less like serious. But they're funneling these drinks to these girls who are already drunk, and then when the girl is just drunk enough, he pulled her aside somewhere in a corner, and like everybody knew that they'd left, and everybody was kind of like, oh, I don't want to bother them. And something in me was just kind of like, I feel like this is one of those situations where we should go bother them just to make sure that she's okay. But I didn't say anything. And when we were leaving, me, the sober person, didn't insist on us going back, and it just really, my soul is not feeling easy about it, because I know that if that had been my friend, my own personal friend, I would not have even questioned it for a second. I would have gone upstairs immediately and been like, girl, we're leaving right now. I don't care. Like, I would have literally just taken her by the arm and taken her downstairs with me. I would not have cared if she was mad at me. I wouldn't have. But because I didn't know her and they did, and because they had said they were all friends, I was just like, oh, I'm gonna let these people who were completely drunk override me, the sober person's, like, reasoning right now. I worded this fucking I always randomly end up holding things in these things. Okay. I'm disappointed with myself on that. And then I just, as I was thinking about it, I was just like, sorry, I have so many mosquito bites. I was like, this is probably how a lot of those situations happen, and the situations I'm talking about. The situations where it's a group of friends hanging out. Some of you guys might know each other well, some of you might not. And two people happen to disappear, and everybody doesn't think anything about it. And then, maybe the next day or a couple weeks later, a couple minutes later, one of them is like, hey, like, I'm not comfortable with what went down that night. And everybody just wants to be like, what? It wasn't that bad. Everything seemed fine. You seemed fine. It's that situation. That situation where later on somebody's finally saying, like, hey, this person sexually assaulted me or abused me or raped me. And there were all these people. You were there for the events leading up to when it happened. And I mean, the situation I described to you probably doesn't even sound that sketch. Like, some of you are probably like, yo, like, that really doesn't sound like that bad. But that's the thing. A lot of times it really doesn't seem that bad, and then it's bad. And it's usually bad when it's behind closed doors. I'm not saying that anything even happened with that girl and that guy. For all I know, seriously, everything could have been fine. But the fact that I'm sitting here and I'm questioning whether or not something happened and I'm uncomfortable about the way things unfolded last night, that's already too much. Like, I already feel like I made the wrong call. I don't care if nothing happened. I still feel like I made the wrong call. So you might be wondering, why is she even talking about this right now? Well, because I feel like with all this talk of, you know, the rise, quote, quote, of sexual assault, and rape case, that's being brought up, and people talking out about it, I think that people are feeling like, oh, this is out of nowhere. Oh man, you can't do anything anymore. And I'm like, no, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I don't think it's that it's out of nowhere and that people are more sensitive. I don't think that's it at all. I think this shit's been going on the whole time and, like, everybody just thought it was fucking normal, if we're being honest. Because I can think of quite a few times where I've seen girls who, like, I wasn't even, like, meeting them. Like, I was just at a bar with my friends and I could see girls across the street who were obviously too drunk to be going anywhere, and some guys who they clearly did not know just walk up and then get them a cab and they all get in, and I'm just like, what the fuck is about to happen to those chicks? They don't even know what the fuck is going on. They're blacked out and they're not going to remember anything that happened. And again, I know I'm using, like, heteronormative situations and I'm using he, her, she, him, like, pronouns and stuff, but, like, it applies in all ways. So, like, seriously, please do not get caught up on pronouns. But I think it's important to talk about this because statistically, most of the rapes that are happening between people who fucking know each other. And I don't mean like they know each other and they, like, were on a date one time or a couple. I'm talking like people who were friends, like that, people who were, like, in relationships, people who were, like, related to each other. So a lot of these rape accusations and allegations that are coming up that people are, like, in denial about, they're in denial about it because they don't want to have to admit that their friend raped somebody. Like, that's a really heavy thing to have to, like, acknowledge. And I think it even goes deeper than that. I think it's that a lot of these situations that are happening, they're so normalized. Like, all of us can think of multiple situations where that's happened with ourselves and other people, or where we've seen it, to where if I can understand, I'm not saying that it's right in any way, but I can understand why somebody would feel hesitant to acknowledge when someone else is telling them, hey, you remember that party where all of us were really drunk and that guy took me off to the side? Yeah, he fucking raped me. I can understand, or I can see where somebody would be hesitant to want to admit that that was rape, and would be more likely to accuse the girl of, like, having regret later, or accuse the girl or guy or person of just being embarrassed, or, like, falsely accusing, or just, like, being too harsh about the situation. Because for you to admit that a situation like that is rape or sexual assault, then you would probably have to admit that you have witnessed multiple situations like that, or that in some cases you have participated in multiple situations that would fall under that category, or that you have experienced multiple situations that would fall under that category. And that's hard, because then you have to admit that, like, even amongst people who have been friends for years, we don't know how to fucking, like, take care of each other. I'm not one of those people who thinks that if somebody rapes somebody that they're automatically a monster. I think we live in a culture that has normalized rape so much, to the point that unless you were raping somebody and practically murdering them, you probably feel like you've done nothing wrong. Unless somebody's, like, straight up screaming, and it's like worst case scenario, something you might see out of a movie. Like, I think a lot of these sexual abuses that are happening amongst friends are happening amongst friends because they're like, well, she's my friend, she knows that I would never, like, intentionally want to hurt her, but yo, dude, like, she was drunk as shit, she can't consent to anything, and you still chose to capitalize on the fact that she was drunk as a way to get her to come into bed with you. Because even if it's that you've been wanting to be with her for a long time, in that moment you were not her friend, you were somebody that she was not safe with. And again, do not get caught up in pronouns. Like, I just don't. I guess I'm making this because I think it's important to offer practical examples of how things can look in these kinds of situations, because I think all of us feel like we're grasping at straws here, and we don't know how to deal with what's going on. We don't know how to deal with how overwhelming all of this feels, like, it's breaking my heart to know how many people around me, like, I knew statistically how many people had experienced, like, sexual abuse and physical abuse and domestic abuse and all of that, but then to, like, actually be hearing, like, actual stories and situations, and then be able to look back later and remember back to specific timelines and specific parties and specific, like, events that I was at, and, like, to later have the story years down the road that, oh, hey, during that party, remember when I, like, disappeared for, like, the rest of the night? Yeah, that's when that happened. And you're like, wait, what? Everybody thought that it was totally fine, everybody was saying it was gonna be okay, and then years later you're finding out, oh, they were raped that night. All this to say, if you're out, and I'm gonna apply this to a bar scenario since that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now from last night. If you're out with your friends and one of your friends is completely intoxicated, like, they're not capable of driving legally, or even whatever, like, they shouldn't be driving, in that moment, you should know that person is not able to consent to any sort of sexual activity. And in that moment, if you are capable of registering that, if that person is truly your friend, then the best way that you can take care of them is to almost act like a guardian for them in that moment. And I know that, you know, I'm not some legal person. I don't know if this is like technically how you're supposed to do things, but I'm like, look, like we got to come up with something because like what's going on right now, like I'm not okay. Like it's not okay. It's not fucking working. So we got to try something like different. Like if you know that your friend is intoxicated and they shouldn't be driving, then you need to make a mental note like they're also not capable of consenting to anything. So if you know that another person in your friend group is trying to get with them that night and you already know that they're incapable of consenting, be a good friend and get your friend an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi or a ride home, or you drive them home if you're like legally able to. Because yeah, that person might be your friend, and I'm not saying that they're not your friend, but I am going to say that in that moment, in that situation where you have one person who is intoxicated and another person who may also be intoxicated or may not, but clearly has a little bit more control of their motion and is clearly interacting with this other person with an agenda, especially if that person is also continuing to supply this intoxicated person with drinks and keeps hinting at or showing signs that they want to take them home. In that moment, love both of your friends enough to keep that situation from playing out. I don't care if your friend gets mad at you and says that you're trying to cockblock them or says that you're trying to keep them from whatever. Like, I don't care. In that moment, it's a fucking gray area. And right now, apparently, we can't trust humans and, like, we can't trust ourselves in these gray areas. So, if you're trying to be an ally to all of the people who are experiencing sexual harassment and abuse, especially in this bar scene, because let's be real, like this bar scene is basically the foundation of rape culture right now. Like there's so much wrong with the bar scene right now. Like there's so many changes that need to be made. It's disgusting. But we'll get to that in another video. If you're trying to be an ally, if you're trying to be somebody who helps to lessen what's going on with this rape culture and helps to keep people safe, then don't be afraid to do the uncomfortable thing and be the party pooper and be like, yo, dude, like, she's too drunk to go home with you right now. She can't consent to anything. Like, try another time. Like, ask her out on a date, you know? And yes, you can, again, apply these whatever pronouns. It doesn't matter. Like, okay. But I'm just saying, like, I keep thinking about that girl, and I don't even remember her name. And like I said, she could be totally fine, but that's not the point. The point is the fact that I'm looking back and I see that as a huge gray area, and I chose as the sober person. I'm not proud of this at all, you guys. Like, I don't want you in any way to think that I'm trying to be like, oh, I'm a good person. No, I'm like ashamed of this. If I can look back on that and feel uneasy about that split second decision that I made to just leave her, then I know I made the wrong call. Because if I ever hear in the future, if I ever find out in the future that something did happen that night, that's on my conscience. I know we don't want to acknowledge the fact that these rapes are happening literally in front of us, but they are. So, this whole pretending like only monsters rape people and my friends aren't monsters so they're not rapists bullshit that we keep doing to try and like stay in this bubble of comfortability and not have to actually like really do anything but still feel like we're doing something because we post about shit on Facebook, like when we post about shit on social media and like this whole social media justice thing, but then out in like the real world we're acting like everything's fine when clearly things are unfolding behind like in front of our eyes that obviously are not okay. Like we can't keep doing that. It's not fucking working. So it's time to acknowledge the fact that good people are capable of raping people. Nice people are capable of abusing people. So now that we've cleared that up, start holding yourselves and your friends accountable. I guess that's it. I don't know what else to say here. Just hold yourselves accountable.